The dusty streets of Goldston, Nevada, had seen their share of desperate men and broken dreams during the 1880s gold rush, but nothing prepared the town for what would unfold on that sweltering July evening at Murphy's Saloon, where honor, desperation, and unexpected love would collide in ways no one could predict. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know in the comments which city you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. The oil lamps cast dancing shadows across the smoke-filled interior of Murphy's Saloon as the evening crowd settled in for another night of cards and whiskey. The Nevada heat seemed to follow everyone inside, making tempers shorter and drinks disappear faster than usual. At the corner table sat Fernanda Martinez, her dark hair pulled back in a simple bun, her calloused hands folded tightly in her lap. She had arrived in Goldstone 3 weeks ago with nothing but the clothes on her back and a determination to start fresh after losing her family's farm in California to drought and debt. Now, working as a seamstress and occasional cook at the saloon, she found herself in an impossible situation. "Come on, Martinez," sneered Jake Morrison, a burly prospector with more gold dust than sense. His bloodshot eyes gleamed with cruel amusement as he shuffled his cards. "Your husband's debt don't just disappear because he's 6 feet under. $500 in gold plus interest. That's what he owed me, and that's what you owe me now." Fernanda's jaw tightened. "I've told you a dozen times, Jake. I'm working to pay it back. I give you $20 every month." $20? Jake slammed his fist on the table, making the other players jump. "At that rate, I'll be dead before I see my money." "No, señorita, I got a better idea." He leaned back in his chair, a twisted smile spreading across his weathered face. "One hand of poker, winner takes all." "I don't gamble," Fernanda said firmly, though her voice betrayed the fear growing in her chest. "Oh, but you do," Jake replied, his tone turning dangerous. "See, I'm betting my 500 in gold against—" He paused dramatically, his eyes scanning her face. "Against you." The saloon seemed to hold its breath. Even the piano player in the corner stopped mid-song, sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere. What do you mean?" Fernanda whispered. Tom Bradley, Jake's frequent gambling partner, leaned forward with interest. "Jake's proposing a marriage wager, ain't you, Jake? You win. The lady becomes your wife, and the debt's forgiven. She wins." He shrugged. "She walks away free and clear." "That's barbaric." Fernanda stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the wooden floor. "I won't be bartered like cattle." "Then you'll spend the next 20 years paying off your dead husband's debt," Jake replied coldly. "Your choice, but those are your only options. Marriage or endless servitude." The other patrons watched in uncomfortable silence. Some looked away, ashamed of their inaction, while others leaned forward with morbid curiosity. This was frontier justice at its most brutal, legal but morally reprehensible. Fernanda's mind raced. She had no family, no friends with means to help her, and no legal recourse in a town where might made right. The weight of her situation pressed down on her like the oppressive Nevada heat. "I need time to think," she said, her voice barely audible. "You got until tomorrow night," Jake declared, raising his whiskey glass in a mock toast. "Same time, same table. Don't even think about running. I got friends in every town between here and California." As Fernanda walked toward the stairs leading to her small room above the saloon, she felt the eyes of every person in the establishment following her. Her heart pounded with a mixture of rage, fear, and desperate calculation. There had to be another way. There had to be. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, promising one of the rare summer storms that occasionally blessed the desert with relief. But for Fernanda, relief seemed as distant as the approaching clouds. The stranger's arrival. The next evening came too quickly for Fernanda, who had spent a sleepless night pacing her small room and considering increasingly desperate alternatives. Running seemed impossible with Jake's connections throughout the territory. Seeking help from the law proved futile when she discovered that Sheriff Coleman owed Jake money as well. As sunset painted the desert sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Murphy's Saloon filled with more patrons than usual. Word of the unusual wager had spread through Goldstone like wildfire, drawing curious onlookers and those eager to witness what many saw as evening entertainment. Fernanda descended the stairs at precisely 7 o'clock, her chin held high despite the trembling in her hands. She had chosen her best dress, a simple blue cotton garment she had sewn herself, and braided her long hair with a ribbon her mother had given her years ago. If she was to face this humiliation, she would do so with whatever dignity she could muster. Jake Morrison sat at the same corner table, a fresh bottle of whiskey at his side and a deck of cards spread before him. His companions, Tom Bradley and 2 other miners, grinned with anticipation. The crowd pressed closer, forming a rough circle around the table. "Well, well," Jake drawled as Fernanda approached. "Look who decided to show up. You ready to become Mrs. Morrison, sweetheart?" "I'm ready to play cards," Fernanda replied evenly, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "One hand, winner takes all, as you said." Jake's smile widened. "That's the spirit. Tom here will deal. He's honest enough for a simple game of 5-card draw." He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Take a seat, and let's settle this debt once and for all." Gee! As Fernanda moved toward the chair, the saloon doors swung open with more force than necessary, causing several patrons to turn their heads. A tall figure stepped into the smoky interior, his boots clicking against the wooden floor with measured precision. Emmanuel Rodriguez was not the kind of man who went unnoticed. Standing well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders earned from years of ranch work, he commanded attention without seeking it. His dark hair was neatly trimmed, and his clothes, while practical, were of better quality than most seen in Goldston. A successful cattle rancher from the valley 30 miles south, he visited the town only when necessity demanded supplies or business dealings. What struck most people about Emmanuel wasn't his physical presence, impressive as it was, but his eyes, dark brown and intelligent. They seemed to take in everything while revealing little of his thoughts. He was a man who observed before acting, calculated before speaking, and commanded respect through quiet confidence rather than bluster. Emmanuel's gaze swept the unusual gathering before settling on the scene at the corner table. He had heard whispers about the evening's entertainment from the livery stable owner, but seeing it firsthand stirred something cold and angry in his chest. "Gentlemen," Emmanuel said quietly, his voice carrying despite the crowd. "And lady," he nodded respectfully toward Fernanda. "I couldn't help but overhear the nature of tonight's entertainment." Jake looked up with irritation. "This ain't your business, Rodriguez. Move along." "I'm afraid I disagree," Emmanuel replied, stepping closer to the table. "Any business conducted in public becomes the concern of decent people." His eyes fixed on Jake with steady intensity. "Especially when it involves the mistreatment of a woman." A murmur ran through the crowd. Emmanuel Rodriguez was known as a fair but formidable man, and his presence changed the dynamics of the situation immediately. "Mistreatment?" Jake scoffed, though his voice carried less confidence than before. "This is a legitimate debt collection. The lady's husband owed me money, and now she's going to pay it back one way or another. By wagering her like property?" Emmanuel's tone remained calm, but there was steel underneath the words. "That's not debt collection, that's slavery." "It's legal," Tom Bradley interjected nervously. "Frontier law allows for—" "Legal and moral are 2 different things," Emmanuel cut him off. "And in my experience, men who hide behind legal technicalities usually know they're doing something wrong." Fernanda watched this exchange with growing amazement. She had noticed Emmanuel during his infrequent visits to town. It was impossible not to, but they had never spoken. He was known as a solitary man who kept to his ranch and his business, avoiding the social complications that came with frontier life. Why was he involving himself now? "Look, Rodriguez," Jake said, standing up to match Emmanuel's height, though falling short by several inches. "This ain't your fight." The lady agreed to the terms. "Did she?" Emmanuel asked, finally looking directly at Fernanda. "Did you freely choose this arrangement, ma'am, or were you coerced by impossible circumstances?" Fernanda felt heat rush to her cheeks. The entire saloon was watching her, waiting for her answer. She could lie, claim she had chosen this path, and preserve what little pride she had left. Or she could tell the truth and admit her desperation to this stranger who had already shown more kindness in 5 minutes than anyone else had in weeks. "I was given no real choice," she said quietly, but clearly enough for everyone to hear. "It was this, or spend decades in debt bondage." Emmanuel nodded, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "That's what I thought." He reached inside his coat and withdrew a leather pouch that clinked with the unmistakable sound of gold coins. "Mr. Morrison, you said the debt was $500? Jake's eyes widened at the sight of the money. "That's right, but I'll buy the debt," Emmanuel said simply. "Right now, 500 in gold, and Mrs." He looked questioningly at Fernanda. "Martinez," she whispered. "Mrs. Martinez's obligation transfers to me." Emmanuel placed the pouch on the table with a solid thunk. "Consider her debt paid in full." The saloon erupted in surprised murmurs, but Jake's face twisted with anger and greed. "Now wait just a minute. This ain't about the money anymore. It's about the game. The wager's been made and the lady agreed to it." Emmanuel's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Then let me make you a counteroffer, Morrison. If you insist on this barbaric gambling, I propose we raise the stakes." "What are you talking about?" Jake demanded. "I'll double your wager," Emmanuel said, his voice carrying through the now silent saloon. $1,000 in gold against Mrs. Martinez's freedom. 1 hand of cards, winner takes all." The crowd gasped, and even Tom Bradley's jaw dropped. $1,000 was more money than most people in Goldstone would see in a lifetime. Jake's eyes gleamed with avarice, but caution warred with greed. "You'd risk $1,000 for a woman you don't even know?" "I'd risk it to prevent an injustice," Emmanuel replied. "The question is, are you man enough to accept the wager, or are you only brave when the odds are stacked in your favor?" The challenge hung in the air like smoke from the oil lamps. Every person in Murphy's saloon held their breath, waiting to see if Jake Morrison's greed would overcome his common sense. The hand is dealt. Jake Morrison's face cycled through a range of emotions: surprise, calculation, greed, and finally, a dangerous sort of excitement. $1,000 in gold was more than he had ever won in a single night, more than most successful mining claims produced in a year. The temptation was overwhelming, but something about Emmanuel Rodriguez's calm confidence made him hesitate. "You're bluffing," Jake said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. "No man risks that kind of money for a stranger." Emmanuel reached into his other coat pocket and produced a second, larger pouch. The soft clink of gold coins was music to every ear in the saloon. "Count it if you like," he said, setting the money beside the first pouch. $1,000 as promised. The sight of so much wealth caused a stir through the crowd. Whispered conversations buzzed as patrons speculated about Emmanuel's motivations and chances of success. Some questioned his sanity, while others admired his gallantry. Fernanda stared at Emmanuel in shock. "Sir, you don't understand what you're risking. My husband was a gambler. I've seen good men lose everything in a single hand. I can't let you—" "Mrs. Martinez," Emmanuel interrupted gently, turning to face her fully for the first time. Up close, she could see the genuine compassion in his dark eyes, mixed with a determination that seemed unshakable. "With respect, this is no longer about what you can or cannot let happen. This is about what's right." "But why?" she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "You don't even know me." Emmanuel was quiet for a long moment, his gaze steady and thoughtful. "I know enough," he said finally. "I know you work hard. You pay your debts honorably, and you don't deserve to be treated like property. Sometimes that's all a person needs to know." Jake slammed his hand on the table, startling everyone. "Enough of this noble nonsense. You want to throw your money away, Rodriguez? Fine by me. 1 hand of 5-card draw, no restrictions, winner takes all." He looked around the crowd with a predatory grin. "Though I gotta say, after I win your $1,000, I might just buy myself a wife anyway." The cruelty of the comment sent a flash of anger across Emmanuel's face, the first strong emotion he had displayed all evening. "Deal the cards, Morrison. Let's finish this." Tom Bradley, his hands visibly shaking, picked up the deck. "Gentleman and lady," he said, nodding toward Fernanda, "this is a single hand of 5-card draw poker. Each player will receive 5 cards with one opportunity to discard and draw new cards. Highest hand wins." "Wait," a voice called from the crowd. It was Sheriff Coleman pushing through the gathered patrons. "This whole situation has gone far enough. Wagering human beings ain't right, legal or not." "Stay out of this, Coleman," Jake snarled. "You owe me money too, remember? Besides, Rodriguez here volunteered. Ain't no law against a man losing his money through stupidity." The sheriff looked uncomfortable, but didn't press the matter further. Emmanuel understood why. In a town where debts and favors created complex webs of obligation, even the law had limited power. "Tom," Emmanuel said calmly, "I assume you'll be dealing fairly?" Bradley nodded nervously. "Of course. I got no stake in this beyond dealing honest cards." Emmanuel pulled out a chair and sat across from Jake, his movements deliberate and controlled. The contrast between the two men was striking. Jake fidgeting with nervous energy and alcohol-fueled bravado, while Emmanuel sat perfectly still, his hands resting lightly on the table. Fernanda remained standing, her position giving her a clear view of both men's faces. Her heart hammered so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. The weight of what was happening, a stranger risking everything for her freedom, was almost overwhelming. "Mrs. Martinez," Emmanuel said without looking away from Jake, "would you stand where you can see both hands? I want there to be no question about the fairness of this game." She moved to a position where she could observe both players' cards, though her knowledge of poker was limited to what she had learned watching her late husband's games, enough to recognize winning hands, but not enough to play strategically. Tom Bradley shuffled the cards with practiced ease, the sound unnaturally loud in the silent saloon. "Cut the deck?" he asked Emmanuel. Emmanuel nodded, cutting the cards precisely in half. Jake did the same when offered, his cut less careful but legitimate. 5 cards to each player, Bradley announced, beginning to deal. The first card landed in front of Jake, a red card, though its value was hidden. The second went to Emmanuel, black. Back to Jake, then Emmanuel, the rhythm steady and hypnotic. Fernanda found herself holding her breath as the final cards were dealt. Jake picked up his cards immediately, his poker face poor enough that several small expressions flickered across his features before he gained control. Emmanuel waited a moment before looking at his own hand, his face revealing absolutely nothing. "Gentlemen," Bradley said, "you may now examine your cards and decide if you wish to discard and draw new ones. Mr. Morrison, as the challenger, you may go first." Jake studied his cards for nearly a minute, his brow furrowed in concentration. Finally, he placed 2 cards face down on the table. "2 cards," he said. Bradley dealt him 2 new cards from the deck. Jake's poker face slipped for just an instant, a tiny smile tugging at the corner of his mouth before he suppressed it. All eyes turned to Emmanuel, who had been studying his cards with the same calm expression he had worn all evening. "I'll take 1 card," he said, discarding a single card face down. The replacement card was dealt with ceremony. Emmanuel looked at it briefly, then arranged all 5 cards in his hand without any change in expression. "Gentlemen," Bradley announced, his voice cracking slightly with tension, "please show your hands." Jake's confidence had been building since his draw, and now he laid down his cards with theatrical flair. "Full house," he declared. "Queens over 8s." A collective gasp went up from the crowd. A full house was a powerful hand, one that would win most poker games. Jake's grin was triumphant as he reached toward Emmanuel's gold. "Excellent hand," Emmanuel said calmly, and for a moment Fernanda's heart sank into her stomach. Had this kind stranger just lost everything trying to help her? But Emmanuel made no move to surrender the money. Instead, he laid down his own cards with the same measured precision he brought to everything else. "Straight flush," he said quietly. 5 through 9 of spades." The saloon exploded into chaos. Men shouted, chairs scraped against the floor, and somewhere in the back, someone started laughing hysterically. A straight flush was one of the rarest and most powerful hands in poker, beaten only by a royal flush. Jake's face went through a series of changes: disbelief, rage, and finally a sick understanding of what had just happened. He had lost not only the debt he was trying to collect, but had just witnessed someone else win $1,000. That's impossible, Jake stammered, staring at Emmanuel's cards as if he could make them change by force of will. Tom, Emmanuel said, would you verify the hand for everyone present? Bradley examined the cards with shaking hands. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of spades, he announced to the crowd. Straight flush. Mr. Rodriguez wins. Emmanuel calmly gathered the gold pouches, then stood and walked around the table to where Fernanda was standing. Her eyes were wide with shock and something that might have been the beginning of tears. Mrs. Martinez, he said formally, your debt has been paid in full. You're free. For a moment, she couldn't speak. The weight of weeks of fear and desperation suddenly lifted from her shoulders, leaving her feeling strangely light. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. No thanks necessary, Emmanuel replied, though I would appreciate the opportunity to speak with you privately, if you're willing. Before she could respond, Jake Morrison's voice cut through the celebration around them. This ain't over, Rodriguez, he snarled, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. Nobody makes a fool out of Jake Morrison and walks away clean. Emmanuel turned to face him, and for the first time all evening, his calm facade showed a crack. Mr. Morrison, he said, his voice carrying a warning that made several people step back. I suggest you go home, sleep off the alcohol, and tomorrow morning, remember that you lost fair and square in front of 50 witnesses. Any attempt at revenge would be inadvisable. The two men stared at each other for a long moment, the tension thick enough to cut. Finally, Jake grabbed his hat and pushed through the crowd toward the door, muttering curses and threats under his breath. As the excitement began to die down and people returned to their drinks and conversations, Emmanuel turned back to Fernanda. Mrs. Martinez, I have a proposition for you. Not a wager, he added quickly, seeing her expression, but a business arrangement that might benefit us both. A new beginning. The morning sun cast long shadows across the desert as Emmanuel Rodriguez's wagon rolled toward his ranch, the steady rhythm of horse hooves providing a peaceful counterpoint to the extraordinary events of the previous night. Beside him, on the wagon seat, Fernanda Martinez sat quietly, her few possessions bundled in a cloth bag at her feet. The conversation after his poker victory had been brief but life-changing. Emmanuel had offered her employment as housekeeper and cook at his ranch, honest work with fair wages and a small but private cabin of her own. After weeks of impossible circumstances and degrading propositions, the offer seemed almost too good to be true. Mr. Rodriguez, Fernanda said, as they crested a hill that revealed the valley below, may I ask you something? Of course, and please call me Emmanuel. She hesitated, then forged ahead. Last night, when you sat down at that table, were you really risking everything, or did you know something about the cards? Emmanuel was quiet for a moment, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. I was really risking everything, he said finally. I'm a decent poker player, but Morrison's hand could have beaten mine easily. Luck played a larger role than skill. Then why, she asked. Why risk so much for someone you'd never spoken to? Emmanuel guided the horses around a rocky outcrop before answering. 3 years ago, my wife Rita died in childbirth, along with our son. The doctor said there was nothing anyone could do, that sometimes these things just happen. His voice remained steady, but Fernanda could hear the old pain underneath. For months afterward, I wondered if I had done something differently, brought the doctor sooner, taken her to San Francisco for better care, if maybe I could have saved them. He paused to navigate a rougher section of road. I finally realized I couldn't change what happened to them, but I could choose how to live with it. When I saw you in that saloon, facing an impossible situation with dignity and courage, I knew I couldn't stand by and do nothing. Not again. Fernanda felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Rita, was that her name?" "Rita Rodriguez." Emmanuel nodded. "She would have liked you, I think. She had the same kind of strength, the determination to face whatever life brought." Samayi. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the desert landscape gradually giving way to greener pastures as they descended into the valley. Emmanuel's ranch sprawled across several hundred acres, with a main house built of timber and stone, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals containing dozens of cattle and horses. "It's beautiful," Fernanda said as they approached the main house. It was larger than she had expected, well-maintained and surrounded by a garden that showed signs of recent care. "Rita designed most of it," Emmanuel explained, climbing down from the wagon and offering his hand to help her down. "I've tried to keep everything the way she planned, but I'm afraid the house has suffered without a woman's touch." As they walked toward the front porch, Fernanda noticed details that spoke of a home rather than just a dwelling. Wind chimes hanging from the eaves, flower beds along the walkway. Shutters painted a cheerful blue that complemented the natural wood siding. Inside, the house was spacious and comfortable, though Emmanuel had been right about needing a woman's touch. The furniture was well made, but showed the bachelor's approach to housekeeping, functional but lacking the small details that made a house feel warm and welcoming. "Your cabin is just behind the main house," Emmanuel said, leading her through the kitchen to a back door. "It's small but private, with its own fireplace and a good view of the mountains." The cabin was indeed small, just 2 rooms with a sleeping area and a main room that served as kitchen and living space, but it was clean, well-built, and had glass windows that let in abundant light. After her cramped room above Murphy's saloon, it felt like a palace. "The work wouldn't be difficult," Emmanuel explained as they walked back to the main house. "Cooking, general housekeeping, maybe helping with the books if you're inclined. I have 2 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse, but they mostly take care of themselves. I'd pay you $30 a month, plus room and board." Fernanda nearly gasped. $30 was more than she had ever earned in her life, more than many skilled workers made in the cities. "That's very generous." "It's fair for the work," Emmanuel replied. "I'm not looking for charity any more than you are. I need help running this place properly, and you need honest employment. It's a business arrangement that benefits both of us." Over the following weeks, Fernanda settled into ranch life with surprising ease. Her cooking was excellent, much better than the simple fare Emmanuel had been preparing for himself, and she brought order and cleanliness to the house that transformed it back into a real home. More importantly, she and Emmanuel developed an easy working relationship built on mutual respect and shared appreciation for hard work and honesty. The ranch hands, an older man named Jose and a young cowboy called Billy, accepted her presence without question. They seemed glad to have decent meals and clean clothes, and they treated her with the respect due any member of Emmanuel's household. But it was the quiet conversations in the evenings that meant the most to Fernanda. As she served Emmanuel dinner each night, they would talk about the day's work, about books they had read, about their hopes for the future. She learned that he was more educated than most ranchers, having attended school in San Francisco before returning to Nevada to build his ranch. He learned that she had been a teacher in California before marrying her late husband, and that she still loved learning, even if life had taken her far from the classroom. One evening in late August, as they sat on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, Emmanuel broke their comfortable silence with an unexpected question. "Fernanda, are you happy here?" She looked at him with surprise. Over the past month, she had begun using his first name, and he had started calling her by hers, but they had never discussed her feelings about the arrangement directly. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Happier than I've been in a very long time." "Why do you ask?" Emmanuel was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the distant peaks. "Because I've been thinking about the future, both yours and mine. This arrangement has worked well, better than I hoped, but I want to make sure you feel free to leave if you ever want to pursue other opportunities." "Do you want me to leave?" she asked, though something in his tone suggested the opposite. "No," he said simply. "In fact, I hope you'll stay. This place feels like a home again with you here, and He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've come to value your company more than I expected." Fernanda felt her heart skip a beat. Over the past weeks, she had found herself looking forward to their evening conversations, admiring Emmanuel's quiet strength and genuine kindness. She had begun to wonder if her feelings were developing beyond gratitude and respect, but she had been afraid to examine those thoughts too closely. "Emmanuel," she said softly, "what are you saying?" He turned to look at her directly, his dark eyes serious but warm. "I'm saying that what started as a business arrangement has become something more, at least for me. I'm not asking you to make any decisions or commitments. I know you've been through enough upheaval recently. I just wanted you to know that you'll always have a place here, whether as an employee, a friend, or—" he paused, "or something more, if that's ever what you want." Fernanda felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were tears of happiness rather than sadness. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt truly safe and valued, not for what she could provide or what she owed, but simply for who she was. "Something more sounds wonderful," she said quietly, "but slowly, if that's all right. I want to be sure we're building something real, not just responding to loneliness or gratitude." Emmanuel smiled, the first completely unguarded expression she had seen from him. "Slowly is perfect," he agreed. "We have all the time in the world." As the last light faded from the western sky and the first stars appeared above the mountains, Fernanda realized that her life had taken a turn she never could have imagined. What had started as desperate circumstances and impossible choices had led her to this place, a beautiful ranch, honest work, and a man whose quiet strength and genuine kindness had already begun to heal wounds she thought would never stop hurting. In Murphy's saloon, Jake Morrison had seen her as property to be won or lost in a card game. But Emmanuel Rodriguez had seen her as a person worthy of respect, protection, and eventually, love. The difference between the two perspectives was the difference between slavery and freedom, between desperation and hope, between merely surviving and truly living. As they stood to go inside for the evening, Emmanuel offered his arm in a gesture both courtly and comfortable. Fernanda took it, feeling for the first time in years that she was exactly where she belonged. 6 months later, on a crisp December morning with snow dusting the mountains, Emmanuel Rodriguez and Fernanda Martinez were married in the small church in Goldstone. The same community that had watched her humiliation at Murphy's saloon now celebrated her happiness, and many remarked that they had never seen a couple better suited for each other. Jake Morrison had left town shortly after that infamous poker game, reportedly heading for the gold fields in Alaska. Some said he left to avoid Emmanuel's quiet but unmistakable warnings about future behavior. Others claimed he simply couldn't stand the reminder of his public defeat and humiliation. Whatever the reason, his departure was noted by few and mourned by none. Goldstone was a better place without men who viewed women as property and honor, as something to be discarded when convenient. Emmanuel and Fernanda's ranch prospered in the years that followed, becoming known throughout the territory for its fine cattle and horses, but also for the kindness and fairness of its owners. They employed many people over the years, always treating workers with respect and paying fair wages. And sometimes, when travelers passed through with stories of other places where might made right and the vulnerable had no protection, Emmanuel and Fernanda would exchange glances that spoke of shared understanding. They had both learned that true strength came not from taking what you wanted, but from protecting what mattered, whether that was a stranger's dignity, a partner's heart, or the simple principle that human beings should never be treated as property, no matter what the law might allow. Their love story began with a poker game and a stranger's moral courage, but it was built on respect, understanding, and the daily choice to treat each other as equals worthy of dignity and care. It was, the townspeople often said, exactly the kind of love story that gave people hope in the harsh realities of frontier life. What did you think of Emmanuel and Fernanda's incredible journey? This story shows us that sometimes the most unexpected moments can change everything. Drop a comment below letting me know which city you're watching from, and tell me what you thought about this tale of courage, honor, and unexpected love. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories like this one, and I'll see you in the next video.